Hello, this is a re-recording of the workshop that I gave at Webflow Conf in Chicago, and it's called Riveflow. It's all about bringing Webflow sites to life with Rive animations. So let's get started with that. So first of all, this is me. I'm Jeff McAvoy. People call me the Rive guy in Webflow circles because I talk about Rive pretty much nonstop online. But I'm a Webflow developer, Rive animator, graphic design background, and I figured out some ways to really integrate Rive into Webflow websites, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So here's our agenda. We're going to talk about what Rive is and what it can do, with a couple of live examples. We'll talk about when and why to choose Rive versus some of the other animation alternatives, and how to use the Rive editor. We'll look into using that and understanding the state machine, and then two methods for adding Rive animations to your website. We've got an easy method and an advanced method. And we won't do Q&A on this recording, but you can always send me questions. I love answering questions about Rive and integrating into Webflow. So next, we've got this website set up as a couple of resources. You can go here to see the examples that I'm going to show and find more resources as well. So check that out, riveflow.webflow.io/webflowconf 2023. All right, so let's get into what is Rive and what can it do. Rive often gets compared to Flash from a couple decades ago, in that it lets you create interactive animations and put them on websites. It also has runtimes to integrate into just about any place you can think of. It's really active Flutter runtimes, Android and iOS runtimes, and I primarily use the JavaScript runtime for websites. It also has React and several others. But it solves some of the problems that Flash had, in that the user doesn't have to download a plugin and install it in their browser in order to view the animations. They're going to run right out of the box. The files are very small and performant, and so it's really a modern alternative to some of the animation options that are out there. So let's look at some of the live examples I have ready here. So if I go this way, all right. So in this example, I've got a Rive animation playing on a canvas here. And you can see there's some subtle animation going already. And this one is hooked up to interact with this form itself. So when the user hovers over the login, you're going to get the character having a little speech bubble pop up. When you hover over the forgot your password link, you get a little animation that plays with that. And you can kind of go into each one and trigger them independently. You can also get this little kick out animation when the user types into the field, and when the user types into this field. When it's not blank, these sunglasses are going to come down, and when the user is ready to submit, when they hover over the button, the character is going to begin surfing. What's really great is this is not just a linear timeline that we're scrubbing through. These are all happening independently. So if I were to actually delete what's in the second field there, you can see the shades are going to go back up. If I retype something into it, that's going to happen there. I can come back and trigger each of these animations independently. So those are some of the really cool ways that you can get Rive fully integrated into your site by connecting it to other elements on the page. Another example I'll show here is scroll-based animations. This is something that a lot of websites want to do, and Lottie is commonly used for that. And I want to show what the difference is between using a Rive animation for a scroll-based and something like Lottie. So with Lottie, as you scroll, you're going to basically be scrolling through the timeline of a Lottie file. In this case, we're going to be adjusting inputs, and we'll dive into what that means a little bit later. But here you can see this is where the animation is going to be. I've got this kind of dive in pill here. May be able to tell that it's subtly moving. As I begin to scroll, it's going to move, and it's going to transform into the submarine. You can also see these waves are happening in the background. You notice when I stop scrolling, the animation continues. We've still got the propeller moving. The periscope is moving back and forth. The waves are still waving, right? So on another method, when the user stops scrolling, the animation sits still. So that's one thing that you can do here that's a little bit different. You can also say, like, when you get down to a certain point and you get to halfway, you can trigger another animation to begin. In this case, these searchlights are going to come on. And in this case, when you get all the way down to the bottom, you're going to have this little treasure, and there's a listener built into it too, so you can get this other little Easter egg down at the bottom here. And then, of course, that's going to all work in reverse as well. Searchlights are going to continue. And what's nice about this is that this searchlights on and off triggers at a certain point. So the user wouldn't be able to kind of stop scrolling in the middle and get sort of like an awkward in-between state. This is triggered to play through that transition all the way through without stopping. So that's one of the differences of what you can do with Rive animations compared to some of the other choices. I've got a lot more examples on that website, so feel free to go and check them out if you would like to, but I'll just show those for now. So I love this quote from Guido Rosso. He's the CEO and founder of Rive. This was in response to a comment on the Discord thread, and I thought it just really captured what it is they're building. So they're not just building a design tool that spits out static graphics or plays a prototype in a controlled environment. We're building a platform that lets you build truly functional graphics that can ship anywhere. And that is absolutely true in my experience. So what you build in the editor is exactly what you're going to get at runtime. And that's pretty awesome. So let's talk about what you can do in Rive and how it works. There's two main parts of Rive. You've got the editor itself. That's where you're going to create your art and your animation, set up the logic for it, how it's going to work. And then you got the runtimes, and that's where you can really choose how it's going to integrate with your app or website or game or wherever it is you're using your Rive animation. Those are the two really powerful main parts of it. It's really built for creating these animations that are going to function at runtime. It also has a really high quality cloud renderer support. So added this note here, you can also export high quality videos and GIFs of your animations or even still frames, and use those in a more traditional method, like as a video player. For example, I just animated an entire music video in Rive. I was able to export all of my scenes in 4K and then bring them into a video editor and sync them with music, and it worked really well. So there's quite a lot that you get with Rive right out of the box. So what about why would you choose Rive compared to some of the options, and when? So first, let's talk about why you would use it. It is a pretty beginner-friendly workflow. Compared to something like learning After Effects and using the body movement export plugin, I think Rive is much easier to learn. It's pretty different than a software that I've seen before, but I think just like any software has a learning curve, I would consider this one pretty beginner-friendly. The timelines are simple, the interface is simple, and what you can do with it, combining those simple interfaces, is very powerful. Number two is the tiny file sizes. I made this example of a loader animation that has interactivity built into it. This entire file is 5 kilobytes, which is tiny. So it's perfect as a loader because that will load super fast as something else is waiting to load on your website. The state machine is one of the next really big things that differentiates Rive from other animation platforms. This is where you set up your logic to choose how the animations are going to transition, how things are going to work, and what it's going to do at runtime as well. So this is not just creating a single timeline to scrub through, it's creating multiple timelines and then choosing how they transition. In addition to those features, you've got bones, so you can attach bones to vector artwork or bitmap artwork and really control characters in that way, or other types of artwork, but it's especially great for characters. You can import bitmap artwork, especially JPEG, PNG, and PSDs, and add a mesh to them, and then weight the mesh with bones and deform it in a way that creates a really nice faux 3D effect. So here's an example where I have some artwork that I created in Procreate, exported as PSD, and brought it into Rive with the layers intact. I was able to attach this mesh and then give it this cursor follow animation that really makes it look like the character is looking at the cursor. There's quite a lot more in Rive as well. You've got motion graph editor. Follow path is a newer feature. Text is a really awesome new feature. Mentioned exporting videos. There's also a really great community on Rive where you can publish your artwork and you can find published artworks that can be remixed or used on any project. And some constraints that are going to choose how elements will, respond according to the movement of another element. And then, of course, the big one is the run times. And so that's what really allows you to integrate your animation into something else like a website or an app. A lot of people are familiar with other animation types like Lottie and Webflow interactions. And what I typically say is that anything that you can do with Webflow interactions, you absolutely should do that way. There's often no need for any external tools when you're building in Webflow because those interactions are so powerful already. When you want to use Rive is when you want to do something that your user has not seen before, something kind of unexpected when you're going beyond the complexity of what you can do with Webflow interactions. So a couple examples I mentioned here: simple scroll-based animations, Webflow interactions are really great for that, and Lottie can be a good choice for that as well. Simple hovers, moving and scaling elements on a page, cursor following in a simple kind of way, those are all really great for Webflow interactions. When you get into more complex things that you want to have cursor following, like especially a character looking at something, Rive is going to be really great for that. Any kind of animated character, Rive is going to really excel at, especially with there's more than one interaction built into it. That's where Rive is really going to be the right choice. The mesh deformed images, that's going to be a great choice for Rive. You can also do something like 3D software like Spline, but I think you're going to find Rive to be more performant and faster loading with certain types of animations as well. Unless you want like a full 3D rotation, you're going to want 3D software for that. But if you're wanting something somewhat simple, especially with a bitmap image, Rive is going to be a perfect choice for that. And then animations that loop at different speeds, Rive can do that really well as well. So there's some examples of when you might choose Rive versus other options. So let's now get into how to actually use Rive. So I'm going to switch over to Rive and start to look at some live demos here. So let me see if I can move my image out of the way. So here we are in the Rive editor, and I'll point out right away that we've got two modes. There's a design mode and an animate mode. And I'm in animate mode, but let me jump back over to design mode. And here you'll see I have this kind of button shape set up, and it's for an eclipse tracker. So find an eclipse coming up near you, and you can use this button if you'd like to. You've got your set of tools across the top here. A lot of these are going to be familiar. Pen tools, primitive shapes. This is where you've got your bones. Joysticks is another really powerful feature. Text is here. Events is a newer feature. And then your select and move kind of options here. And then this is the structure of the art. Very similar to tools like Figma. So I've got all my artwork set up here, and I'm going to go over into animate mode and show you what I have this set up to do. So right now what we're looking at is the state machine. If I hit play on the state machine, it's going to start to work the way I have this set up. So what I have this set up to do is on hover, have this moon come up, block the sun, change the color of the button, and then on hover out, have the moon continue along a path and kind of reset back to its first state. And the way I'm doing that is with these timelines down here. So first I've got a timeline called idle, and here I'm keying some properties of each of these shapes. So on the text itself, I'm keying the color of the text and the strength of this modifier group, which you can see the other thing that happens here is it becomes a much thicker and more slanted version of this font. And so I'm keying on the idle state, I'm keying the color and the strength of that modifier. On the button itself, we're keying the color and the outline thickness. On the moon, I'm keying its constraint along a follow path, and that is following a path that in this case is actually squished down, but you'll see when I hover it, that path actually becomes bigger, and that's how the moon is following this path along. That's what makes it follow that arc. And I'm also, in this one, keying the position and scale of the path itself. So that's what squishes it down, so that it's basically just hiding behind the button here. And then I also define a hover state. So in both of these cases, both of these timelines are just really a single frame of keys, and I'm gonna choose how to transition between them in the state machine. So this is the hover state. You'll see on the text one, I'm keying the color to change into white, and the strength of my modifier to become 1, which is gonna be like 100% strength in this case. The button background, I'm keying the color of the background and the stroke. The moon, I'm keying its distance along that path to 25%, so that's that position on the path. And then the path itself, we're keying the scale so that it comes back up to this arc for the moon to follow, and then it'll go back to the other one in the next state. And I'll talk about this idle reset in just a second here. So that's what I have my state machine doing. So you can see here, we've got these states. These states are these timelines. And it's going to start, if I hit play here, it's going to start by going into the idle state. And then it's going to wait for a condition called hover to be true, so that when that happens, it's going to transition, and then when hover is false, that's when it's going to go into this condition and follow that path there. And that is using this input here. But what I'm going to do is actually just kind of rebuild that logic so that you can see exactly how to set that up. So I'm creating a new state machine, and in this one, I don't have any inputs or listeners or any states set up so that we can kind of see how to really build this. So I'm going to start by adding the idle timeline into my state machine area here, and I'm going to add the hover on. And so I know I want it to go from entry into idle. That's the first state I want it to go into right when we start the state machine. And then I'm going to want it to go from idle to hover on. And if I play this right now, you can see that it's actually just looks like it's jumping straight to hover on. But there's a console here that can show that it does go to the idle state and then from idle to hover on. But it's happening so fast that we can't see it. So it looks like it's skipping this. But that's because we want to actually give this reason to pause here until the user takes an action. And that's where we're going to set up an input. So in input, there are 3 types: number, Boolean, and trigger. In this case, we're going to use Boolean because we can set that to true and false, which works really well for something like a hover. And I'm going to add that, and I'm going to name it hover. And this is a checkbox. And so what I can do here is say, from idle to hover on, basically wait for this condition. So I'm going to add a condition, and I want it to be when hover is true. So that is when it's going to go to that position. So here you can see now it's waiting at the idle state. If I come over here and check the box, you can see it transitioned into the hover state. And that transition happened instantly, which I like to have that, kind of slow transition happen there, and we can choose to make that happen. So I'm going to add some duration to my transition. I'm going to give it 1,000 milliseconds, which is a full second, which is quite long for a transition, but I think it looks really nice in this case. So there we go. And right now it's happening in a linear mode, but we can also give it some interpolation. So we could have it start pretty fast and then end really slow and kind of ease into place. So let's try that. Check the box. You can see that's exactly what's happening. So now we're going to want to have a method for, what happens when you uncheck this box. We want it to get back to its original state, right? So what we would do then is drag a line back to this idle state and give it the condition of when hover is false. So we'll change hover to false, and we can go ahead and give it that same duration. So we can give it 1,000 milliseconds, and we can even have it start fast and end slow. And then let's restart this, and now we can see when we check the box, that's going to come up, and when we uncheck it, it's going to reset back to its original state, which works really great. Except in this case, you can see that the moon actually kind of like reverses course and goes back. We actually have the option to have it continue on its path, and that's what we're going to have it do next. So this is a really great simple hover animation, and we're just going to take it a little bit farther with this idle reset state. So in this case, the only thing that's different is I have the moon follow path distance set to 100%. So on the idle state where we had it going to 0%, we're going to have it instead go to 100%. So that means it's going to follow. It starts at 0 and goes to 25% on hover. And then what we want it to do is continue around the circle back to the original point, which is 100%, which is the same position as 0%. But since it's at 100%, it's going to interpolate between 25 and 100. So it'll continue around the path instead of reversing back to 0. So that's what the idle reset state does. So in this second state machine that I just created, I'll add the idle reset. And instead of this transition going back to idle, I'm going to have it go to idle reset, and we'll do it with the same conditions. We'll set hover to false. We'll give it the same duration, 1,000. And I actually think in this case, I want it to start off slower and then get faster. And then from there, I want to close this loop basically so that we can have this interaction happen repeatedly. And I'm just going to draw a line here. I'm not going to give it any conditions because once that happens, I want it to go instantly back to the idle state and wait for the next hover. So let's play that. Now, when we check the box, it's going to go into the hover state. And when we uncheck it, exactly what we expect, it continues around the path. And you can see then that it goes into the idle state and waits. So we can do this again. And that's what we want, right? We want this to be able to be replayed over and over and over again. And so that's working well with this checkbox, but what if we wanted to actually hover in the artboard? So that's where we're going to set up a listener. So for the listener, I'm going to select this shape, the button background shape, and hit this plus button to create a new listener. And here, it's going to give me some options. So I can say when pointer enters, which is what it defaults to, I can control my input. So here's the input that we created. It's this Boolean one over here. So that I can say when pointer enters this shape, set hover to true, which is perfect. And then I'm gonna, while I have this selected, I'm gonna create another one. And instead of pointer enter, I'm gonna say pointer exit, so that I can say when pointer exits, set hover to false. Now, if I play the state machine, I can actually control the states on the canvas itself. And you can see when I hover that the checkbox is actually checking and unchecking. And so we're controlling the logic of the state machine on the canvas itself. So that's a pretty simple kind of setup for the state machine, but it gives you a sense of what you can do within the editor itself. So let's get back to the presentation here. That was the button. So one of the next things we'll do then is look at the easy method. How do I actually add this to Webflow? So let's talk about what the easy method is. First of all, it's going to let you just create or find a Rive animation, copy some iframe code, and then paste it into an embed block in Webflow. It's very easy. Why would you want to use this? Because it's easy. The listeners that you set up in the Rive editor are going to work within the Rive canvas on your website right away. It's visible within the Webflow designer, which is kind of nice when you're designing around it. And you don't need any third-party software or code or any external hosting, anything like that. So let's look at how that works with a live demo. All right, so I have a Webflow site open here. This is the demo site that I mentioned for Webflow Conf, and you'll see that I have an embed set up here. So let me click on this. I have this set up. It's just a code embed. And what I'm going to do actually is go back over to Rive, and I'm going to use this share drop-down menu, and I'm going to click share link. It's going to let me create a new link, and I'm going to choose the state machine 2. That's the one I just created, and I'm going to click generate link. And that's going to generate a link for me, and it also shows you any previous versions of the link that you've generated. So as you make changes to your file. You don't have to worry about those changes going live until you create a new link and grab some new code for it. So here's the embed code I'm going to grab. There's some also nice sharing links here. So if you share this one, it's going to give you just a nice view. It'll show you the input as well. If you use the embed link, it'll do that same thing, but without the input. And then what we're going to grab here is the embed code. So let me copy that. So now that I've got that on my clipboard, let me come back over here and I'm going to edit this one. And I have this little tag in here because I'm going to copy these properties and put them in. But if I hit paste, I now have my frame with the size of the artboard as it was set up in the Rive file. And let me just cut this because I'm going to use that in a second. But if I hit save and close, you're going to see that becomes visible in the designer right away, which is great. And if I hit preview mode, I can come in and that hover interaction is going to work already on the page, which is awesome. I like to add a couple of edits to this code. And so that's where I had this here. I'm going to actually just grab these properties. So instead of leaving the width and height at this kind of fixed amount, I like to set the width and height to 100% and then do the same thing with a style tag, setting it to 100% width and height. And that way I can really set the size of the canvas using the properties in Webflow. So here I'm just going to replace where it has width and height. I'm just going to paste this in. So now I've changed width to 100%, height to 100%. I've done the same thing with a style tag. So I'm doing it in HTML and CSS. Save and close. Here we go. So now it's taking up 100% of this area and it's going to work the same way. You can see it's scaled up a little bit actually. And it's working. And that way, when I have this at different breakpoint sizes, that's going to scale depending on how I have the embed element itself set up. And so with that, you can see I've actually got the width set at 100% and height set to 60 viewport height. So that's what's actually controlling the size of the file itself. That's it. That's the easy method. It's very easy. So let's continue on here. With the easy method, you're going to be able to use any interactions that you have set up that are inside the canvas area. The advanced method is going to let you also have that Rive file interact with things outside of the canvas. And that's going to be more like some of the examples I showed at the beginning. Your scroll-based animations, things that interact with forms, other elements on the page, things like that. So let's look at the advanced method. Hoping that the advanced method, although it's going to include some JavaScript code, I'm going to try to break it down so you can see exactly what it's doing and how to do it, and try to make it seem a little bit more accessible because it's going to really allow you to superpower your websites even more than you can right now. So here's how this works, right? So all these inputs that you set up inside the Rive editor, those are accessible via code, the JavaScript runtime code. And I'm going to show you how that works exactly. So anything that you have set up here, in this case, I'm showing I've got a couple of Boolean inputs, a couple trigger inputs. I have a lot of examples doing this with number inputs as well. This is where it gets really powerful so that any external source can control these inputs in your Rive file and make them, and then make your state machine behave as you have it set up. So you can do something like use microphone input to drive animation on something, or scroll percentage, or any external data source, really. So that's pretty exciting, and I found that anything you can think of is probably possible. So let's look at how to do the advanced method and what the advantages are. So this is where you can control interactions outside the canvas area, elements on the page, external data sources, other sources can control the Rive animation. You can also have the Rive animation control other elements on the page. So you can say, when I click this, make something else happen on the page, right? That's the power of the JavaScript. And it really seems like the possibilities are endless. What you need in order to use the advanced method is you're going to load the Rive runtime library onto your site. you need to host your .riv file with a third-party service because you currently can't upload those files to Webflow. You're going to create a canvas element on your page and give it an ID so that your code can reference it. And then we're going to write the JavaScript code to make it work. We'll look at all that. My pro tip is to use a Slater app for this. This makes writing and adding JavaScript to your Webflow site so much easier. You can write it right into the Webflow site. You can use another tool like Code Sandbox, but what I found is that Slater is built for Webflow, and it makes it much, much easier. It also has AI assistance built into it, so I actually don't really write the code. I just prompt and ask for it, and it works. So that's my pro tip. Use Slater.app for this purpose, and I'll show how I'm using it in this live demo. All right, let's get over into the next file that I'm going to demonstrate. Again, on the Eclipse theme, this is the file. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and jump into showing you how this file is set up to work. So let me hit play here. And I think I can zoom in. All right, so on this one, I'm going to have this connected to a form on a page. It's going to have a name input, an email input, and a button to submit. And in this case, what I want to happen is when the name field it gets typed into, I want this sun image to grow. When the image field gets typed into, I want this motion to begin on this image. And when the user hovers the button, I'm going to have this moon come in and say, "Welcome, Explorer." And at runtime, I'm going to swap out the word Explorer for the name that they typed in. So I'll show in the code what is controlling that. So that's how I have this set up. And in this case, you're going to see the state machine is set up very similar to the previous example. So let me pause this. Here I have multiple layers within the state machine so that I can control each of these actions separately, which also means they can all happen independently or at the same time or at different times. And so that's one of the advantages. You can add multiple layers and create multiple versions of what's happening there. So, and I named these so that I know what's going on. So on the email layer, I have two states, and you can see basically I've created two states for each one, an idle state and an active state. So on email idle, let's look at that animation. What is email idle doing? Nothing, right? It's keying the bones of the mesh so that it's, actually, let me show this. Let me hide my moon group so that the sun shape is not moving at all. On email, when I play this one, is where you can see the sun is actually moving. And let me show you what I'm doing here with this. I'm using a mesh, and if I edit the mesh, I can, I think I can show you what it looks like. Yep, so here it is. This is, I've added these mesh points to this image, and then you can see these bones are different colors. And here I can show you how I have the different points weighted to them. So these points here are weighted to this yellow bone. Actually, you can kind of see that here. So if I click on a point, it'll show you it's 100% weighted to the yellow bone here. And then these ones are 100% weighted to this kind of salmon colored bone. And then you can also split that too. So I have this one here. So this one's 100% weighted to this mint bone, and this one has just 20% influence from that mint bone, and 80% is to the root bone, which is actually just kind of hiding down here. That's more like just a stationary kind of anchor bone. And then these bones I'm animating here, they have different properties. Like some of them move a little bit, some of them scale a little bit. Let's see. Some just have a rotation set to them. Here, these ones have scale. So that's where you're getting these different motions inside of this shape. These couple bones in the middle here are scaling, and that's what's giving it that effect. These bones are kind of waving back and forth. I think I can, show them. So here, these ones are moving and controlling this kind of solar flare over here. This bone is just kind of moving back and forth, which is controlling this flare. So this is how I'm creating the motion. And then in the state machine, it's just going from a state where all the bones are keyed in a single position or a single scale so that they're not moving, and then moving into a state where they are moving. And then this is just a looping animation that is playing here. I'm doing the same thing with the name ones, and actually this one's much simpler. In this case, the name is just going to set the scale of the sun to 100%, and then name idle, it's actually smaller. So it starts off smaller because like I put it at 71%. So that's what makes it grow when the name field is checked off. And then for the button itself, let me turn the moon back on. You can see that I'm keying the position of the moon group, and so it's actually down here kind of off the stage, and then on the button on, it's keying this position right here in the middle so that it's blocking everything except for the flares, the corona around the sun at the end there. And again, that's all being controlled with the logic here. So if I hit play and I can show you the transitions I have set up, this transition is saying when the name Boolean is true, move to this state. And in this case, go from this state back to this one when the name condition is false. And that's what's happening here, right? So you can see that transition happening. On the email one, you can see that transition into the active state when I check the box, and then back to the idle state when I uncheck it. And on the button state, you can see it's going to go to button on, which is going to bring that moon in and play the text animation. And then when I uncheck it, it'll go back to its original position on the button off state. And in this case, I'm not using any listeners because I want this all to be controlled with external sources, not the canvas itself. So what I will do to get this hooked up, now that we know how the file works, what each of these inputs are going to do, because I'm going to use the code to control these inputs. So what I would do here is then download a .riv file, which I've already done. And so I'll kind of jump to the next step here. I'm using a service called Upload Care to host my files. And so if I come over into Slater, where I have my code set up, let me make this a little bigger, you'll see that I'm using this is the code that is running all of this. So let's walk through what this does. Here I have the elements on the page, right? So I've got the name field, the email field, and the sign up. And actually, let's look at that on the page here. That's a little bit lower here. So here's the name field. On this one, I'm giving it an ID of name. Email field has an ID of email, and the button itself has an ID of sign up. So that's how I'm referencing those elements in the code itself. And then here is where I just have a JavaScript embed. And this is where I have a canvas set up, and you can see I'm using the same size properties as I set up in the easy method. And in this case, I'm giving it the ID Eclipse Club Canvas. So let me save and close that. So then back in my code, you can see I'm referencing these things. Get element by ID, I've got name, email, and sign up for the fields and the button. And then here is where I set up the Rive instance, and this is referencing the canvas itself, Eclipse Club Canvas, and it's referencing the source of my .riv file. So here it is the upload care URL. Again, you can just drag it and drop it into upload care and then copy that URL and paste it here. That works really well. And then some other parameters I have set up here. So this is going to start to reference things that are inside the file itself. Autoplay true, that's pretty simple. You can specify the artboard. In this case, I have an artboard called new artboard 2. So if I go back, and actually we'll look at that and then we'll see we have state machine 1. That's the name of the state machine. So if I go back to my file, you can see that's the name of my artboard is new artboard 2, and the name of my state machine is state machine 1. So that's what I'm referencing here. And then I'm calling the inputs of my state machine. And I'm getting them by the name of the inputs. So the name of my inputs are name, email, and button hover. So let's look at that. I've got name, email, and button hover. So I'm calling these exact inputs here. Here we go. And then I'm going to start to control what happens with those. And in this case, like I said, I just asked Slater for this code. And I think this might even be the prompt that I used here. I said, I have this input with a field with ID of name. When it's not blank, I said console log it because I know I'm going to then add some code over into this. And then one quick extra shout out for Slater. You can create a library of snippets. And in this case, I have these set up because I use them quite a lot. So I know, like, if I have a Rive input Boolean, I can actually save this snippet and update it here so that I can choose. I can just copy this and add it into the file here, which is what I did in this case. So what this is saying is that we're going to add this listener for this input type, and it's going to say if the input is not blank, set the name value to true, which means as soon as the user types into it, set this value to true, which is exactly what we have the state machine set up to do, right? So again, looking at this quickly, this means if the user types into this, it's basically going to check this box for us, which is going to make the sun grow, which we'll see when we publish at the end. And if it is blank, which is going to be the else condition, leave the checkbox as false. We're going to do the exact same thing on the email field. So when it's not blank, set the checkbox to true, and otherwise leave it as false. And then the one that's a little bit different here is that instead of listening for input into a field, we're going to listen for mouse over and mouse out on the button. And so when the user mouses over the button, set the Boolean value to true. When the user mouses out, set it back to false. That's what the code is doing. There's one additional bit of text here that is going to set the text run value here. So in this case, I am also creating a input for the name entered, which is going to come from the value of the name field itself. So whatever the name the user types into the name field, we're going to update the text run where it says Explorer, and that's here. Yeah. So if the name entered, so actually let me show that in the Rive file. This is another really great thing you can do here. Here I have the username, and let me turn this off. Let me come back. I'll just come back into design mode. Here I have, this is the text run. It says Explorer, and you can see I renamed it to username. And then actually what's really important is that I renamed this text run. This is part of the text element itself. And this is where the value, this is like what it says in the actual canvas here. So you can change that at runtime as well, which we're also going to do. So it defaults to Explorer. That's what's in the file itself. And I've called this name entered. And by renaming it here, that means it is accessible by the code, which is what I'm doing. So back to Slater, you can see I'm referencing it because it's called name entered. So this is the code for set text run value. Which text run? It's called name entered. And I'm going to set it to input value, the value of the name input from the name input field, which has the ID of name. And if that's blank, then I just want to set it to Explorer. So it doesn't show up blank. It has a value if it's blank. So that's what all of this code is doing. I grabbed this script and pasted it into my site in Webflow so that it will all work. So this is all hooked up. And in fact, if I publish this, which we'll go ahead and do, we're going to see, we'll take a look at the easy method canvas and this advanced method canvas so we can see how it works. So let's go to this site, scroll down, you can see this one, again, working exactly as we expected. That's great and easy. And now here we are, we've got the artwork showing up. And if I start to type in a name, we're going to get that canvas to grow. And in fact, let's type in a name so that we can demonstrate what this is going to look like. I'll put in Penny. I met Penny at the Webflow conference in Chicago, which was awesome. All right, and I'll type in an email address, penny@email.com. and you can see the motion began as we expected. And now when I hover the sign up button, it's going to say welcome Penny. Again, exactly as we expected. And once again, these are all independent too. So I could say, maybe if I left this blank and I tried to sign up, you're going to see the motions not happening on the sun. Or what I can do here, if I leave my cursor, let's not leave that blank. If I leave my cursor in this field and do the hover, I can also update this in real time. So you see, as soon as it's blank, it says Explorer, and it also shrunk back down because it's empty again. But I could type in another name too, like I can put my own name in here. Or I can put Corey. Or I can put Baltazar, who I also met in Chicago. So pretty powerful what you can do. Again, this is something that you just don't see that often, and that's one of the really cool advantages of using something like Rive. So again, this is live. You can go and check this out and play with it for yourself if you'd like to. And that's a live demo. Can't do Q&A on this recording, but like I said, I love answering questions about Rive and Webflow. I put a lot of time into figuring these things out, and I think it's incredible, and more people should be doing it. So if you want to reach out to me, please do. I'm very active on Twitter. You can find me through the Riveflow website, or feel free to get in touch on LinkedIn as well. And with that, I just want to thank you so much for sticking with me to the end. This is the end. And yeah, have fun using Rive.